Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's being brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals publish to educate their consumers, to build their businesses, and to leave a legacy. We're doing a series of spotlights on remarkable attorneys across the country with a focus on estate planning and elder law. And joining me on this segment from New Hampshire is Sarah Ambrogi. Sarah, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm glad to be here.
I know that it's a broad topic, so please give us a little brief, summary of your areas of focus and the types of clients that you serve.
Thank you. So I'm in the estate planning and elder law business. So exactly the topic, of your spotlights. And what that really means is that we work with clients, everyone from young people, young married couples, or people starting out in life, all the way up to much older. And with the younger folks, of course, we're primarily focused on doing wills, trusts, powers of attorney, just making sure they have the basic documents in place or making provisions for the children. But the elder law piece starts out with those same kinds of basic documents, but also migrates over to assisting them in thinking about long-term care, kind of how to protect assets, if that's a possibility, or if there is an actual nursing home need, sort of crisis Medicaid planning to get somebody approved for Medicaid. So, and it kind of runs the whole gamut. And in between, because we work on those two areas, we also, of course, do the probate side of things. If somebody's passed away, we help with getting the estate or trust processed.
I have found that fewer young people really have that awareness that they should get this stuff done, estate planning wise early on. Do you find that trend's changing, or is there still need to be education in the market about that for the younger folks?
There definitely needs to still be education. I would say that the kinds of young people that I see are the really kind of heads up kids that, I should call them kids, but young married couples or just young singles who either have some awareness based on maybe their own family situations, or maybe their parents. I've had a few people who came in because their parents gave them estate planning as a wedding gift. By the way, it makes a great wedding gift. But I think that there definitely needs to be education. The statistic that I have heard, and I don't know if it still holds true, is that about 70% of people, of adults in this country, have nothing in place at all. And so the marketplace is very big and very deep. There are a lot of people who have not taken care of it.
That
And then there are
statistic
people, and I
reminds
also
me of
learned that, yeah,
that
yeah.
statistic reminds me of financial planning. People kind of kick the can down the road.
Absolutely. I think they think it's not going to happen to me. So an old boss of mine used to say that it always takes something to motivate someone to come in and do their planning, and whether that's the loss of somebody in their family, or a nursing home situation, or just a scare, a health scare. A lot of times it does take kind of that little bump in the road. The other thing, though, I think sometimes, like I said, these sort of heads up people that have a child and say, oh, wow, we don't have anything in place, we really need to do this. Actually, interestingly, I see a lot of people who come in, maybe they're in their late 40s, early 50s, and they're thinking about retirement, or getting in that direction. And they say, well, we have an old will from when our kids were born. So children being born does tend to be kind of a motivator to people, but then they tend to put the plan on the shelf and not think about it again. And it is important not only to do it once, but to keep it updated.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, this recent pandemic has shined a huge light on the lack of preparation for a lot of
Right.
folks. Did you find any folks in like that crisis situation? What are some of the dangers that people have found themselves in?
Yeah, I mean, we've been busier than you can believe, pretty much ever since the first wave of the pandemic. I mean, I think people began to realize they needed to do this, but the kinds of situations people find themselves in is somebody goes into the hospital and the family realizes that they never updated their planning. So it's not clear who's going to make healthcare decisions. That's one issue. Or in the sadder cases, somebody passes away and there's no plan. And I'll tell you, the real heads up for people is, if you have anything other than the traditional nuclear family, and if you have any desires other than sort of default things to a spouse, things to children, you've got to have a plan in place. We have a number of people, key situations, a couple that's lived together for a long time but has never gotten married. Um, Nobody has a problem with that these days, but the law doesn't recognize it. So that's a problem. Another situation is a blended family where, it's a second marriage for one or both of the people in the couple, and they have children from one. Sometimes it's mine and yours and ours, even sometimes. The default rules in the law don't deal particularly well with those situations either, and there can be a lot of misunderstanding and really hard feelings. So, technically, truth be told, if you're in the traditional nuclear family situation, you're probably going to muddle through okay. Anything sort of out of that ordinary, though, is going to really be a problem.
Can we speak to that for a moment? You mentioned like the non-nuclear family, like the couple
Right.
that's been together just never got married. That's a unique topic, so I'd love to talk about that a little bit
Sure.
more and expand upon that. What kind of, the law doesn't recognize it. What kind of troubles will they find themselves in if they don't plan ahead?
So the problem is that if you are, let's say, I'll kind of disguise the situation a little bit, but a situation where a woman lived with someone else, they lived together for a long time. He passed away, sadly. They were not married. They were planning to get married. They just hadn't done it. He had children from a prior marriage. They bought the house together, but her name's not on the house. And so as a result of that, she really is out in the cold because there is something people are going to be listening to this are going to say, well, wait a minute, I thought there was this thing called common law marriage, and there is, but at least in New Hampshire, and I think this is true pretty much in other parts of the country as well, it's pretty hard to prove. You have to go a pretty long way, and I won't get into the legal technicalities, but you've got to go a pretty long way to prove that you were as good as married. And then if you can, then you're entitled to whatever a spouse would be entitled to. But in the absence of that, here now we have a woman living in a house that she doesn't own and she's not going to inherit. And she's out a good deal of money. So it just becomes very complicated. And the children are really the ones who are now going to inherit the house. And I'm hoping in that particular situation we can work it out, but it's uncomfortable and it's difficult because it just that spouse who can't prove that she really is as good as a spouse, or if it's going to be hard to do that and it can cost money, is really in a tough spot.
That's an eye-opening insight for sure. What are some of the other like big misconceptions? Because you mentioned common law marriage, people think
Right.
that stuff. What other like big myths or misconceptions do you hear out there that might keep people from getting their ducks in a row properly?
Sure. So a couple things. People hear that, oh well, I don't have to worry about it. Everything goes to my spouse, right? It just goes to my spouse. Well, that is true in some ways, not in others. It's not a good assumption to make as a global assumption. Another big myth, and I don't know where this comes from. People say to me, "Oh, well, I have a will, so my estate avoids probate, right?" No, a will is actually just a document that guides the probate process. A lot of people seem to really believe that. They come in believing that. And then another one, just to tie it back to elder law a little bit, a lot of people confuse revocable and irrevocable trusts. And they think when they do a revocable trust that they're protecting their assets from nursing home expenses. They're not. A revocable trust is a great planning tool. Helps avoid probate. It's really great. It is not a Medicaid or nursing home planning tool. And a lot of people say, well, I did a revocable trust 5 years ago, so I'm all set, right? No, this is the beginning of a conversation. It's not the end of a conversation.
Can
You
you
know,
define that a little bit, the revocable versus irrevocable? What exactly, people have heard of that, but what exactly do those mean?
sure.
Revocable trust versus irrevocable.
Sure. So a revocable trust is a trust that you create that is revocable. You can, meaning that you can change it or cancel it or do whatever you like with it at any time throughout your lifetime. And what the revocable trust does is it's a way of changing the name on assets. So let's take your home that you own, for example. You take it from your name and you put it into your name as trustee of the trust. As a result of that, when you pass away, the house is going to go to the people who are listed in the trust as your beneficiaries, and there's no probate process. There's no court involvement. It's basically just sort of self-actualizing. It just kind of takes place. But because you have the beautiful flexibility with a revocable trust, you're not actually doing anything to protect those assets. It's really like you owning them under a different name, but it's still you. An irrevocable trust is a very different proposition. It's a trust you create, you can't change it. You're not really the owner of the assets. And you do it as a way to get your assets out of your name and into the name of another entity. And once you've done that, if you do it successfully and you follow all the rules, it will succeed in having it so that assets that are in that trust are not yours to be called upon in the event of something like a long-term care Medicaid scenario. It's got to be done very carefully. The rules are very specific and they do vary state to state. But it's a great planning tool for people who are prepared to kind of take the inflexibility piece of it into account and are okay with that. They say, I don't care. I'm okay with not having control. I just want to make sure my assets don't have to be used for nursing home expenses. If you're okay with that, then it's a great planning tool.
Now, with that in mind, who would prefer to have an irrevocable trust where you can't change anything?
Well, so I find in general that most married couples up to and sort of into early retirement generally are going to be better served by a revocable trust. And there's some reasons for that. The way that Medicaid looks at married couples and assets, and I won't have time to get into that, but it's so there's a little more flexibility for married couples. So I tell them they come in, they say they think they want an irrevocable trust. I kind of talk them out of it because there's a fair amount of protection built into the law on the Medicaid side of things for a married couple. So the typical person who does benefit from an irrevocable trust is somebody who is newly single or perhaps just a single person. But let's say somebody's 70, 72 years old, spouse has died, or they're not married, and they want to make sure to protect an asset for their children. They're motivated to take the inflexibility into account, and doesn't bother them. So usually people in their 70s.
Makes sense. One more quick question while we're on the terminology side.
Sure.
Something comes to mind. The will versus the living will. Can you define
Ah,
what the living will is versus is
sure.
that versus the
Yeah, they're
will?
totally different. So a will is just a document, like the last will and testament directs your assets upon your passing. You have a special kind if you've got a revocable trust. We won't go there. A living will is another way of describing the healthcare power of attorney, or more accurately, a living will forms part of a healthcare power of attorney. Living will is simply a statement of I wish or I do not wish to have various end of life treatments performed. It also often is part of what we call a healthcare power of attorney, where you actually designate someone else to make decisions for you. So, living will has everything to do with healthcare and end of life. A will has to do with last will and testament that actually doesn't come into impact until you've actually passed away. Does that
Uh,
help?
Great insight. Yeah, it's almost like it almost makes me think it's the wrong term because it makes you think of a document. It makes you think of
Right,
all your
right,
stuff, but it's really about your healthcare decisions and
exactly,
decision making. Got it.
exactly.
Sarah, what inspired you to focus on estate planning and elder care? How did you start in this field?
So I started out just as a typical transactional attorney making the rounds in a medium-sized firm out in California. Um, but I did a rotation through estate planning and I just really enjoyed it. It's very satisfying to me because I feel every day like I'm helping people. I'm solving it, helping them to solve problems. It's a great, I love people, I love working with people, and I love helping them in various circumstances. I also have been through a number of different situations myself personally with the elderly, family members, and I know how confusing it can be, even for someone like myself who is well educated on the topics. And so I understand how completely overwhelming it is to people who all of a sudden mom is not well anymore and we got to figure out what we're going to do. I understand, I can really empathize with that. So it gives me great satisfaction to be able to help people who find themselves in those situations. I just love what I do. It's great work.
For folks listening who are in New Hampshire or in areas that you can serve, how do they find you, connect with you, and learn more?
Thank you. So I'm admitted in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire. I have quite a lot of clients who are in Northern Mass. Um, it, you can find me online. Our website is Ambrogi, AMBROGI, lawoffice.com. And from there, you can contact us or you can give us a call. All that information is right on the website. There's a contact us place. You can even do a web chat with us. And there's also our phone numbers right there.
Sarah, this has been terrific. Tons of insights. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your specialized knowledge with my audience today. I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
All right. Thank you. Stay well. Thank you.
Sarah Ambrogi from New Hampshire. And this segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals publish to educate their consumers, to build their practices, and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for joining me.